Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessica Ward King, also known as the Stigma Crusher. And here at this channel, we deal with issues of mental health and mental illness from my twin perspectives as a person with lived experience of bipolar 2 disorder, as well as a person with experience as a PhD in experimental psychology. Does that sound like your jam? We would love to have you. Start off by clicking subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified each and every week when I post, click that notifications bell too. And with that, I guess it's time that we start stigma crushing for this week. Oh, recovery. It is the noun that eats like a verb. Recovery is a destination that I appear to be constantly getting closer to and yet never actually reaching. And when I'm talking about recovery, I'm talking about recovery with and from mental illness. For me, as a person with a relapsing, remitting chronic disorder, I don't have any real expectation of reaching that destination of recovery anytime, let alone anytime soon. However, I am always on that path. Even when I am not doing well, as I am now, I still consider myself to be on the road to recovery. Sometimes one step forward, 4 steps back, but on that actual road nonetheless. And so I do spend a great deal of time, of my time as a person with mental illness, actually kind of stagnating and just waiting to see if whatever treatments my treatment team has put together can possibly make a dent in what I'm struggling with. And that has been particularly so over the past year during our lovely global pandemic, but it's equally the case at other times, other relapses that I've had in my career, my distinguished career as a person with mental illness. And so I spend an awful lot of time just navel gazing, just looking at my behavior, my cognitions, the way I'm thinking, my moods and emotions, and trying desperately to detect any change. A change for the worse or a change for the better. I spend my time trying to figure out how I'm feeling, how I'm thinking, and what can I report back next? And so in this context, I find myself at my computer, let's say, or drinking my morning coffee. Someone says something funny on the radio, or my wife pipes up with an interesting piece of news. And I notice myself the next moment, as though from outside myself, smiling. And I think, oh my God, stop the presses. What does that mean? Now, the act of kind of reflexively flexing one's cheeks isn't generally a cause for much to write home about, at least amongst the typically developing folks that are not struggling with a mental illness. But for those of us who are, for me, who is, when I spend most of my time quite depressed and not actually doing a whole lot of smiling, if I notice myself smiling at random, it is cause for, well, I was going to say concern. I don't know that it's necessarily negative concern, but concern nonetheless. It causes me to fly into a tailspin of trying to interpret all of the signs that is mental illness and depression in particular in my case. Now, you would think I have all of the materials that I require at my disposal, right? Like, aren't we the very best informants on our inner cognition, the reasons why we do what we do and why we say what we say? Aren't we our very best informants? In fact, aren't we the only evidence we have and the only evidence that our care team has? Well, not necessarily. Think of playing poker. Okay, now I don't exactly play poker, but I know a little bit about what it involves. And when you are trying to give the message to somebody else that you do or do not have certain cards, you might be blush. So when you are playing poker, you might use bluffing as a method of trying to fool your opponent, right? So you've got the royal flush, you don't want them to know, so you look and act a certain way that you hope will give them the impression that you are, actually behaving oppositely to what you are behaving. And so with that bluff, you may, especially if you are not a good player, have a tell. So something that your opponent can look at you and say, they're bluffing. I can tell. Whether that is, reflexive tapping of the foot, whether you chew the inside of your cheek when you're getting excited, whatever that tell is, there are things about our behavior that other people can actually identify and interpret correctly better than we can. And so I have an example of this. When I was going through a particularly difficult period of therapy, I was having deep brain stimulation, and it was only in the first 2 months of having it, so no real expectation of seeing anything yet. And about half a month, maybe 3/4 of a month into it, my wife announces that she thinks I'm doing better. Well, let me tell you, I disagreed. I did not feel as though I was doing any better. I felt as though I was just as depressed as I ever was, that nothing had changed, that nothing was going to change, that it was useless to have gone through the therapy to begin with, that I was, having basic buyer's remorse over this surgery and this whole thing. And she said, nope, you're doing better. Well, we might have fought over that a couple of times because I sure didn't feel like it. Until about maybe a month later after that, after she'd already been singing the song that I was going to be doing better, I actually started to subjectively feel like I was doing better. She was right. Don't tell her that, but she was right. And that was one of those times when what I was subjectively feeling inside of me didn't match with some aspect of the way I was carrying myself or the way I was behaving, which allowed an outsider, albeit one who knows me very, very well, to detect that my mood and cognition were different even before I could. Like a sniffer dog that can tell when there's, a contraband in somebody's luggage. I can't tell that when I go up to it, even if I were to sniff it, but the dog sure can. So that's something that happened to me that made me really realize just how much I am not the ultimate informant on my own mental health. And it was kind of infuriating in so much as, it was great because she was able to trigger me off to feeling better and, let my care team know that it was going positively. But it was completely demoralizing to feel as though I had no idea what was going on with me. It made me feel as though my mental health was happening to me. My mental illness was just occurring and just going on its merry way without me having any say in the matter whatsoever. And it was, and it continues to be, exhausting to think that for all that I'm the primary informant, I'm not necessarily the best informant. And remember, this isn't just idle chit-chat or, idle navel-gazing. This is something that's really important for me as a person with mental illness to be able to do, to be able to go to my care team and report back accurately how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. Is the medication or the therapy that I'm using, is it working? Is it making any difference whatsoever? And so now I have this standing tradition or recommendation or requirement, let's put it that way, that my wife is present with me at every single appointment that I have, because she has this privileged view into the way that I work. And it's been kind of terrible during the pandemic as well, because my care team doesn't have that hands-on interaction with me that they would normally. And so it's much more difficult to see somebody's very vague tells and bluffs when you're on the other side of a potentially very small screen with poor resolution and some buffering issues. It's much more difficult for my doctor to be able to look at me and determine whether he thinks I'm looking or seeming any better. And so that's the importance of it all. Are we going to change medication? Are we going to continue? If there are side effects, is it worthwhile continuing even though the side effects are there, given what we all can discern about how I'm doing? And that kind of brings me to, what can we do given this? So given you find yourself smiling randomly at the computer table and you don't know what to make of it, what I do is have an ongoing dialogue with my wife about the way I'm feeling and my mental health. It's really essential for us to have that ongoing. And it doesn't have to be, your wife or your husband. It can certainly be anyone who's very, very close to you and very close to your situation. May not be necessary that they live with you, kind of is helpful, particularly during pandemic, but in normal times when we could go and see one another, that probably wouldn't even be that necessary. It's just somebody who knows you and knows the way that you behave, the way you carry yourself, has seen you when you're well as when you're ill, so that they can make that comparison. For them to have the inside scoop on what's going on inside your head, so that they can tell you what they see going on outside of it. And then it's great if that person can accompany you, or if you can take their information with you to any of your care team's appointments, so that you can say, for example, I'm not feeling any better, but my wife tells me I look a little lighter. Whatever that may mean, it at least gives them some input. And so, what is my conclusion? This week, when I found myself smiling, it was in response to something specific, a specific stimulus. It didn't feel particularly happy, just more smiling. And upon conferring with my wife and my care team, we determined that I didn't seem any lighter. Not this time. Not yet, anyways. But it will happen, and I will be well on my way to recovery again. We are going to explore recovery more thoroughly in another video, but it's worth mentioning here, that construct of recovery. It's also worth mentioning this week that we have, it's Mother's Day here where I am anyway, in North America. And there's a video that I actually posted up last week that talks about mothers and mental illness from the perspective of, mine, both as a daughter with mental illness and then as a mother with mental illness, and of a child that themselves has mental illness. And so I kind of explore that. I would really invite you to take a look at that. We all have mothers, and some of us are mothers, and it's worthwhile sharing either way. So I'm going to link you guys to that so that you can share that too. I hope you enjoyed today's video, a bit of a shorter one for today, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week in my next video. Take care and have a good one. Bye.
Stigma Crusher.